So known and designated as Shamita, or in Arabic meaning quiet, so quiet skirmish. However, the proper border post in reference was the Shanita, as it refers to a northern area border post on the Kuwaiti border with Iraq, and accordingly the skirmish was designated as the Shanita border skirmish. Now, on the 26th of December 1972, Kuwait sent a delegation of members of the National Assembly of Kuwait to Iraq. The Kuwaiti delegation met with Saddam Hussein, the then deputy president of Iraq. I wonder if he's going places one day, and discussed the border demarcation between Kuwait and Iraq and the need to resolve this conflict. Hey, I won't invade you guys, trust me. Not to, not in, not to 13 years. Trust me though, trust me. No, 17, 17. The Kuwaiti delegation also met with Iraqi President Hamid Hassan al-Brak, who assured members of the delegation that the border situation would be resolved accordingly. Accordingly, on the 26th of February 1973, another Kuwaiti delegation headed by Sheikh Shabal al-Hamad al-Jama al-Shaba, mouthful, then Kuwaiti Minister of Foreign Affairs, visited Iraq and remained there until the 2nd of March 1973. I wonder if he needs two plaques in his office, because that is the name. Kuwaiti and Iraq Kuwaiti and Iraqi authorities conducted several meetings in which Iraq authorities claimed that the Wadaban Island and the Bibiyan Island were parts of the Iraq due to their importance as major water canals for the trade of Iraq and significant geopolitical strategic points. In response, the visiting delegation stated that Kuwait would not cede any of its territory, and if the territories were needed for joint economic development purposes, then Kuwait would spare no effort in realizing such an endeavor, advancing exclusively humanitarian through a concession from the Emirate of Kuwait within the formalization of a just mission approach, and that the following finalization of the border demarcation be met so that they could start that process. Wait. As the Kuwaiti delegation was set to leave Iraq on the 3rd of March 1973, the Iraqi government proposed an agreement between Kuwait and Iraq which would enhance the capabilities of Iraq and expanded trade throughout Kuwait. The Kuwaiti delegation was willing to cooperate as long as its territories were not compromised unjustifiably. In response, the government of Iraq and the leadership at the time withdrew their proposal and started applying pressure, military pressure. In the meantime, and due to the history of restraint and calm disputes, Kuwait border posts were rotated between soldiers of the Kuwaiti Armed Forces and the Kuwaiti Police. On the 20th of March 1973 at 0300 hours, which is about 3 o'clock in the morning, the crisis occurred between Kuwait and Iraq based on land demarcations that Iraq was claiming. Units of the Iraqi military advanced on the Kuwaiti border police station, secured by members of the Kuwaiti border guards, and asked the border guards to vacate the premises. When the officers in charge refused, Iraqi forces attacked the lightly guarded border posts. The border guard troops held their ground and battled heavily armored Iraqi forces throughout the night and into the morning. The skirmish wounded several and claimed the lives of the first lieutenant in charge and his corporal. As a result, Kuwait declared a state of emergency and the borders were sealed. But no war, no war. Immediately after, Mubak Abdullah al-Jamal al-Shaba and his deputy brigadier general, Sheikh Shalah Muhammad al-Shaba, that's it, mobilized the Kuwaiti armed forces and led the deployment towards the border with Iraq in preparation for the worst. The Kuwaiti Combat Quick Reaction Force Contingent, or the KCQRFC, was led by a Kuwaiti colonel assisted by a lieutenant colonel consisting of elements of the Kuwait Army and the Kuwait Air Force. The combat reaction force included a commando force led by a Kuwaiti lieutenant colonel, being combat supported by an armored tank brigade and two supersonic English Electric Lightning fighter aircraft or jets, who were tasked with engaging the area of conflict as required, and remain acting as armed air vanguard patrollers and monitors of the area from Qasara in the east to Safwan in the west. Mmm, mmm. In response to the assembling of the Kuwaiti armed forces at the Morabak and Shahal, the Iraqi authorities issued a statement at 1300 hours on the 20th of March 1973, which is about 1 o'clock in the morning, claiming that the Kuwaiti forces were the aggressors, which were intruding on Iraqi territory, while Iraqi military units were conducting military drills, and as a result, the Iraqi military responded with force, of course. In response, Kuwaiti authorities issued a similar statement claiming that the assault on the Shanita post was an assault on Kuwaiti territory and subsequently an assault on Kuwait. Yeah, of course. In addition, the Kuwaiti statement added that the assault occurred during the time when Kuwait was expecting an Iraqi delegation from Iraq to come to Kuwait to settle the demarcation of the border between the two countries, based on the agreement that Baghdad signed on the 4th of October 1963. The Iraqi government proposed that the Iraqi military and the military of Kuwait should pull back 10 kilometers from the assaulted post. What do you think this is? Checkpoint Charlie? Checkpoint Shanita? Accordingly, Kuwaiti authorities refused this proposition and requested the Arab League to demand from Iraq to pull back their forces to the demarcation line set by the Arab League Forces Joint Operation Vantage. Also, Kuwait authorities insisted on the withdrawal of all Iraqi military units from the Shanita border post and also demanded to settle the demarcation of the border between Kuwait and Iraq right now. Consequently, border disputes were shaping to be governed by a political resolution, and of course, Kuwait would never be invaded by Iraq ever, never again. And of course, Kuwait would never be invaded by Iraq never, never again. Until 17 years later. But with that being said, this is the first time Iraq invaded Kuwait. Not full force, but I mean, it's shaping up to be interesting to say the least. So, get your gas mask ready, because Kuwait is going to be a lot of burning of oil. Anyway, hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, hope it wasn't too fast, hope it was nice pace, hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, learn something. Bye bye. Yeah, I heard that I should work on outros, but there is no outro. Moral of the story, always guard your back and always make sure your border posts are secure, because you never know, your neighbor might want you back because they originally saw you as the 11th province of Iraq. So just be careful with that kind of rhetoric, right? Especially when a guy named Saddam Hussein comes into the picture. Yeah, watch out for that guy. Learn something.